So I present a paper together with Renzo and Michele. So it's a 3-persons paper, and we will all try to speak. So it's just, we would like to thank you for having given us the opportunity to present our new project, which is an attempt at combining texts and images to better understand aspects of Hittite religion. And Michele is a philologist, most of you know him already. I'm the expert for art, let's say, and Renzo is the digital humanist, a computer scientist specialized in databases. So our idea is pretty simple. We would like to create a digital database as a tool for cross-referencing Hittite texts and images, but not just a generic digital tool, but a tool with a specific aim to detect and explore religious atmospheres, the religious atmospheres of Hittite festivals. And so why is Hittite religious atmosphere interesting, and is religious atmosphere a thing? We assume it is. You know, we walk into a room and we feel the atmosphere. We travel to another country and we feel a different atmosphere. So an atmosphere distinguishes one place from another by uniting material, concrete experiences with sensual and affective aspects. And so atmospheres involves us at an emotional level and are powerful social construction. Foundational elements, we believe, of any religion. And in Hittite religion, festivals occupy a paramount place. Major festivals lasted several days, involved many participants and complex scenarios, dramatic performances, and so on. And above all, we believe they were events capable of generating phantasmagoric atmospheres. But is it possible to study these atmospheres? We think it is. Cultural anthropologists somehow open the ways and teach us that, well, given that in our case, obviously, we cannot interview the Hittites directly, we can either look for texts describing atmospheres in detail, but they do not exist, or we must turn to a bottom-up approach. This means we have to look at material elements that combined create specific atmospheres. And we can group these elements into 3 categories: prescribed actions on one hand, also including body techniques, for example, I don't know, the direction in which somebody moves, or the way in which coded gestures are embedded into ritual performances, and so on. And second, the material devices, the props used upon the occasion, for example, specific vessels or specific weapons. And lastly, the design of the space where the events take place, which may be a city gate, a natural sanctuary, or some secluded chamber of a temple or a palace. And also we should consider under this category the light condition of the space-time, since evidently nighttime and broad daylight inevitably enhance different atmospheres. So the combination of these 3 elements, actions, materials, and places, blends into what we may call sensory strategies that define the affective atmosphere. So far, the, let's say, theoretical, cultural, anthropological framework of our project. In the case of the ancient Hittites, we have particularly texts and images describing these 3 elements. However, the interpretation of both classes of sources is not straightforward. And now I think Michele will just introduce us to why texts are lacking information.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? Hopefully. Yes. I was
sorry.
also one. Yes.
Sorry, I'm sorry, guys, I was clicking on the wrong, so this is just an example of an affective atmosphere. And this is our, sorry so much, excuse me, but here you see our theoretical framework with the three elements
Hittite
involved.
Palace.
The Hittite Palace, which is now in Rome, okay, but it was more or less the same in Hittite times. And so, yes, sorry, I was clicking the wrong presentations. So anyway, now I go on one slide, and it's up to you, Michele. Sorry again.
Yes, thank you. Please slide. Yes, so as many of you already know, Hittite Anatolia produced the most extensive textual corpus of cult festivals of the entire antiquity. Approximately 30,000 extant tablets pertain to the religious sphere, and over 10,000 are classified as festival text, which are now the object, next slide please, of the German research project Das Corpus der Hittitischen Festrituale, directed by Daniel Schwemer and Elisabeth Rieken, providing extensive digital transliteration and search tools, and thus optimal conditions for our endeavor. These texts contain a vast amount of information about cult structures, representation of gods, priests, rites, and more generally on the material aspects of religious experience. Next slide, please. Here we have one among thousands of possible examples, just to give an idea of a text we deal with. These concern rites to be performed at the market gate of Arinna on the third day of the great festival of Arinna. And the text reads, "The herald marches ahead, the lord of the chair sits, the herald says, 'Dinner' to the musicians, the cupbearer in attire marches ahead towards the lyres," and so on and so on. We have hundreds and thousands of these texts. So, but, and let's move please to the next slide. Festivals and religious atmosphere are also obviously reflected in several archaeological data sets, including rock reliefs, orthostats, architecture, statues, ceramics, objects of various types, and materials, including thousands of seals and seal impressions. So both text and material culture are highly relevant to the study of cult practices. But although there are obvious points of contact, there are serious difficulties in relating these two kinds of evidence. These arise not only from terminological and disciplinary boundaries, or from the fragmentary state of the evidence, but also from the different nature of the sources themselves, with their specific and sometimes divergent modes of communication and the different kinds of challenges they pose. Challenges that are specific to textual sources, thank you, are the following. First, and most trivially, the real-world reference of several words are unclear, or the reference is ambiguous. Second, festival protocols provide us with a wealth of information about the setting, logistics, participant development of ritual scenarios, but a fine-grained reconstruction of the relevant temporal and spatial coordinates in which the action is wrapped is usually impossible. Third, the kind of information a text provides us with is deeply conditioned by the purpose that particular text fulfills. As is well known, Hittite tablets were produced by the Royal Chancery for specific purposes within the framework of the centralized administration of the cult. So they were never written with the aim of providing an overall description of a rite, but rather they provide data sets that are specifically targeted at particular purposes and actors, a characteristic that is partly reflected in the existence of textual subgenres and technical jargon. And this is something which impacts very much the way we can extract information from them. Finally, Hittite festival texts have a complex tradition, often spanning several centuries and including variants and changes over time. And moreover, some of them are clearly compilation, so that we are often not sure of the reality behind the text. And with this, I let the stage to Renzo for the last part of the talk.
Wait a moment, I still have to say something about the challenges posed by the images.
Yes, sorry,
the
you are
word
right.
to Renzo. No,
sorry.
It's quite banal, but of course also images have important challenges. So just look at this image. This is a relief, stone relief part of a larger cycle from Alejahuyuk, and it represents a moment of a feast, of a festival. And we see 3 male performers represented in decreasing heights on different standing lines, different attires, and so on. So the one on the left, on your left, is a dagger swallower, and the one on the right is an acrobat performing a trick on a ladder, and the one in the middle, well, is doing something, perhaps is an attendant to the acrobat. So we actually know what we're seeing. It's just standard circus performances which have been used in religious and civic festivals across the globe. But on the other hand, we don't know, the image don't tell us the precise identity, what's happening, the precise identity of the participants. The place where the spectacle takes place is unknown. Does the changing standing line point to a specific stage? Is it a theater-like stop? Is it a moving spectacle? Is this a sequence of events, or are these spectacles taking place at the same time? And finally, why the objects, why the ladder, why the sword? Are these allusions to war or building activities, to professions, to trades? What is the religious connotation of these images? So we believe that intersecting our visual sources with the texts, we may help, on one hand, elucidate these open questions, and on the other hand, just better understand how, what kind of atmospheres was crafted in these events. And now we come to the digital tool that we are building together with Renzo, and I give the word to our computer scientist.
Okay, thank you, Alessandra. So we have a simple, very simple approach in front of us that is to represent with keywords both images and text. But we were not too much satisfied of this approach because it does not, it's too, in some sense, it's too abstract, it's too generic. Why we want something more precise, more defined about this representation. So the idea was to define a specific model to describe the essential aspects of both a text and an image. And this specific model is based on the idea of descriptor, where a descriptor, which is in some sense different from a keyword, is something which is well defined the content of a text or the content of an action described in a text, or an action described through some picture, some image. So the idea is that we want to have this set of descriptor, but not just a generic set, but something which is embodied, which is managed in a specific structure called a dictionary of descriptors. And the idea is that we can arrange those elements inside the dictionary using two well-known and well-accepted abstraction mechanism in the modeling area of computer science, that is specialization and aggregation. These are two well-known in, for instance, in database design, but in many other fields of computer science. And we wanted to apply those concepts to the idea of these descriptors. Moreover, we have added another important aspect, that is the idea of representing uncertain information. We do not have a lot of time to describe in details the model, just a few ideas. I show you an example. Okay, right. The next slide is about the implementation. We have performed the first implementation of the system, which we have called it description-based, similar in some sense to a database, but composed by descriptions. That is, each document or part of a significant part of a document is represented through a description. The description, the system allows a large set potentially of those descriptions, and allows search management and search of these structures. In particular, we have underlined our application a large database which can grow to manage thousands or billions or millions of documents. And we have designed an application that can be used to manage those large databases, not only because of an underlying system, database management system, but also because the application is built for cooperative research. That is, for research in which several scholars, several experts of the field share their descriptions and integrate them in a single system, in a single description base. Just a few words about the searches of this new kind of system. The idea is to have two kinds of searches: simple search, which is similar to keyword search in other systems, typical of, for instance, information retrieval systems, but we use descriptors to perform the search, and we use the relations defined inside the dictionary to enhance the performances of the system, the retrieval power of the system to find the interesting descriptions. The idea is to use the specialization mechanism so that when one uses a generic descriptor, the system automatically substitutes this generic descriptor with all the specific, the more specialized descriptor, so that all the relevant documents are found. For instance, as you can see from the slide, when one uses the weapon descriptor, also the sword or any other of weapon is searched in the description base. Here you can see a simple example. On the left part of the screen, there is a description base. In this particular case, we have the description of 3 documents, in this case, 3 textual documents, while on the right, sorry, you can see a fraction of the dictionary that is used to structure, to define the relations among the descriptors used in the description base. So you can see, for instance, a word which is circled, performance, performers, and if we go to the next slide, we see an example of an image. In this slide, we have in the system the description of this image is again very simple description with not too many structures, but we can have more structured descriptions. And here I evidenced the same word performance because in the next slide again, we can see a kind of search. In this case, the simple search. In this search, we use a word, and as you can see, the system will find all the documents contain a description with those specific descriptors. Okay, so performers, both in text and in images. The system can store documents alongside their description. So when one obtains a result, it can simply click on the links and obtain in the system the document associated. Okay. So the system, as I said, is a web application, and we are just finished its first version, and it can be used. It will be used to apply not only to this specific case but also in other cases. Okay, so Alessandra, you can.
It's Michele now, I think.
Michele.
Yes. Only thank you so much. Only a few last words with three major risks to our endeavor. One might be called the risk of thinness if we are unable to get enough data into the system and thus miss the opportunity to link enough evidence in the first place. But even if enough data is stored in the database, there may be disappointment if it turns out that the two sets of data, text and images, are too inhomogeneous, so that there is insufficient connectivity between them within our system. And finally, hallucination, if we are able to match text and images, but it turns out that the connections are not meaningful, for example, because of biases related to modern categories that are misapplied to the Hittite evidence. However, if neither these nor other potential risks derail our plan, we hope that the project will result, and here we can have the last slide, please, in a valuable contribution to the study of Hittite religious atmospheres while providing a new digital framework for bridging the gap between textual and visual evidence in ancient Near Eastern studies. Thank you so much from all of us for your attentions, and we are happy to answer questions if there are.
Thank you so much. Everybody is applauding very hard, so you can hear it. Yeah, questions? Is there? Well, maybe from my side, I'm not so familiar with the topics you were talking about. So I was wondering about the size of your database and the performance. You mentioned it briefly, so could you tell a bit more about how many images and text you have in there?
Michele, you want to answer? Or
okay, I can answer.
Oh, Lorenzo can answer. Go on.
Okay. The system is based on PostgreSQL database, so it can arrange for millions of documents of descriptions. And there is a simple way of storing all the descriptors. Of course, we do not have made many experiments with lot of data, so we do not exactly the possibilities, the capabilities of this system. But we hope that we can grow a lot before hitting some limits because of the technology behind it. The technology, as I said, is on relational databases, so we can structure a lot of data.
Nice, thanks.
Also, if I may add, our proof of concept, sorry, may I add something? We are starting now the project with a specific case study, which is Alajahayuk. So the images at our disposal are rather well defined, the corpus of images, and Michele is selecting also well-defined corpus of texts. So we will see how it works. Of course, Alajahayuk, for those of you who are familiar with it, is a very easy, it's the easiest case study to start with, because we have almost certainly a situation where a festival is both represented and described and also with a material background that we know. So if it works there, we will from there expand into other corpuses. What do you think, Michele?
Yes, it is exactly as both of you said. We are starting with the case study, and actually we hope that soon we will be able to have an institutional framework for this, and of course also a formal cooperation with the corpus of their Hittite Feste Rituale project. But then in principle, we would love to extend our data sets, including ideally most possible data sets, both from text and images that are relevant to the Hittite religious atmospheres.
Micro to Shai. Yes,
there is one question on the WhatsApp. Amir Gilan asks, please ask me, what kind of atmosphere do you expect to find?
Why is Amir following us on WhatsApp? Tricky. Okay. Well, Michele, do you have specific expectations?
I want to smell Hittite perfumes and be immersed. No, well, out of the joke, Alessandra, you are the queen of atmospheres. Perhaps I would only mention that a PhD dissertation by Chicago PhD dissertation will be available soon by Talia Lisen, who also studied precisely the topic of Hittite religious atmospheres or festive atmospheres. So this seems to be an interesting topic, but yes, I would leave Alessandra.
If I may add, no, the point, guys, it's that festivals have been studied as occasions of great mobilization of economic resources or diagrams of ideology, which they are, of course. But what is of interest for us now is exactly to highlight the sensory aspects. So what I expect personally is that such an exploration of both data will give us more information about senses of the bodily senses, sensuals, if you like, aspects that are normally overlooked, like, as Michele says, but it's not a joke, smell, light conditions, climate conditions, sun, dark, temperature, and also auditory conditions that in fact are of immediate impact to understand how performance, a festive aspects, or a religious cultic event may work. So evidently, religious events have many different layers of meaning, but if we don't understand how they work at the prenoetic level, so to say, before reason, and how they really capture our whole immediate bodily experience, we will never really grasp how they are able then to convey ideas, convey ideologies, materialize and so on, and resource mobilization and so on and so forth. So I don't expect specific atmospheres, but I expect atmospheres to be interesting and studiable, so to say.
Questions are coming up, so the last two ones, last call for you first.
Thank you very much. So it's Marianne Béranger from the Universita. I have just a quick question. So if you want to do research, we have to use the specific describers that you are using, or can we use synonyms? For example, instead of weapon, instrument?
So, Renzo, would you like to answer this?
I don't understand very well the question, sorry.
So if I may say, perhaps I did, sorry, I didn't hear your name, but anyway, thank you for your questions. I think what we are generating, it's a low-tech, simple thing. We are generating, let's say, now Renzo will correct me if I use wrong concepts, but our dictionary is a Hittite ontological dictionary. So if you want to start your queries, it would be a good point to look at our dictionary, first of all, to see what we included and what you can search. And if you're not happy with that, in the sense that something is lacking that you need, in our ideal world, now you can do nothing, but in the future you may add parts to this dictionary in order to get it complete. So no synonyms work, so far as I understand it. So for example, if you use another word for performers, you will not, the system will not find it, but you will have the dictionary to look up which words you can use for your query. Did I understand your questions correctly?
I'm not sure, but the discussion gets a bit long, and we have another. Okay, colleague, it's pretty much the same. Give the word back to the. Oh. Yeah, it was great. Okay, so well then we're done. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
I'm not sure what's.
You can share.
There's slides coming up.
Good.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
You see it with all paper.
Great. Wow.
Yeah. We hear you. We see you.
Sorry.
Mute your one.
Okay.
Okay, you're set up. We're seeing your first slide with your name on it, and see you and hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. So thank you for the kind invitation to participate. I'm very sorry I couldn't be there in person. So I had my flight cancelled after several hours on the tarmac on Friday night. So I'm sorry that I couldn't make it. But anyway, it's great to be able to present virtually. So I'm going to tell you about the MTAAC project, which is a project now actually completed. The work was carried out between 2017 and 2020, although some of the team members involved are still continuing to build on the work, but they would be the ones to tell you about that, not me. So in terms of funding and support, the project was funded through the 2016 round of the Transatlantic Platform Digging into Data Challenge. And the three funding agencies concerned were the DFG in Germany, the NEH in the USA, and SSHRC in Canada. So yeah, this is an international project involving colleagues from Toronto, Frankfurt, and UCLA. We also received additional support from a number of institutions, which you see here: CDLI at UCLA, the Max Planck Institute, the University of Oxford, Compute Canada, the Centre for Digital Humanities at UCLA, and Google. We had several students assisting the project through the Google Summer of Code program, and then also the University of Toronto's Work Study program. So thank you to all the funding bodies and supporters. These are our participating institutions. So myself as PR in Toronto, Christian Kiokas in University of Frankfurt, and then the late Bob England at UCLA. And our teams, of course, so stressing the teamwork aspect here. And I also want to highlight the role of Emily Paget-Perron, PhD student in Assyriology, who is the project coordinator and really the instigator of the project. It was really Emily's brainchild. So she would be better placed to tell you about the technical details. She's a specialist in digital humanities, digital Assyriology in particular, and then our team of student workers, both in Assyriology, computer science, and information. And then the University of Frankfurt team, again, PhD students, undergraduate students, and postdocs. And then at UCLA, under the late Bob England, and again, Emily playing a central role there. So that's our team. I quickly move on to tell you about the MTAAC core objectives. So we aim to develop state-of-the-art natural language processing tools for cuneiform languages, including machine translation, and especially to create a methodology and an NLP pipeline for Sumerian and cuneiform language processing. We also aim to produce new information in the form of text translations and also annotated text, so annotated both linguistic and semantic annotations. And then finally, we aim to share all of our software and information in machine readable, usable, and freely accessible ways. So from the point of view of future applications, we had in mind the reuse of our infrastructure for other genres and other languages, and also the ability to explore the corpus quantitatively. We also aim to facilitate cross-collection and cross-linguistic studies, and also to provide a model for linking Assyriological data. In terms of the research data set, we focused on the ER3 administrative corpus. I should say that all of our data were drawn from the Cuneiform Digital Library Initiative database, which at the time of the project contained over 500,000 artifacts, and in public and private collections around the world, and over 350,000 digitally documented artifacts. I'm sorry, it's very early for me here in Toronto. I'm not a morning person. And also 1/3 of the artifacts digitized in the form of images, and also 2.65 million lines of transliterated text. So this is the vast corpus that we were working with. And within the field of cuneiform studies, we aim to focus on the ER3 corpus because of its particularly suitable characteristics for the kinds of processing that we were interested in. So first of all, there being numerous transliterated and standardized texts, and also the existence of a parallel corpus translated into English. Another bonus of the ER3 corpus was the fact that we're dealing primarily with a restricted style and a restricted range of topics, and also quite formulaic, repetitive, and simple grammar. And then also the existence of numerous untranslated texts that we could experiment with. So these are the bonuses of the ER3 corpus, if you like, the characteristics that made it particularly suitable for the kinds of experiments we were interested in. So this is a distribution of text genres of the ER3 period. Of course, administrative texts in the top line being by far the most numerous. So these are the numbers overall. So yeah, comprising almost 97% of the total ER3 corpus, with almost 68,000 texts available in transliteration, but only a relatively small number of those being available in translation. And then of those, the transliterated texts, of the transliterated texts, 2.34% of those being available in translation. So this is the breakdown. So we're focusing on the administrative texts in general. I'm not going to go into that in more detail for the reasons of time. So again, a breakdown of the data set that we were dealing with. So around 70,000 transliterated texts, about 1.5 million lines of Sumerian textual data, and then about 20,000 lines of translated texts. To take a random earthly administrative text as an example, so this is just sort of color-coded to show you this really the degree of standardization of the text, and the fact that the position of the words often sheds light on the semantic value. There are few affixes, unlike literary texts, and the texts are often laid out rather in a list format. So with the great majority of texts, there are evident patterns, although of course some are more complex. Why machine translation? Well, our aims in this respect were to increase access to the text contents, and also bearing in mind especially the fact that there are relatively few cuneiformists around the world, and that given the vast numbers of texts we're dealing with, it's impossible for them to translate all texts manually. And in fact, specialists, including earthly specialists, often do not publish translations. So they often go straight from the text itself to transliteration, and then interpretation analysis based on the transliteration without making the intermediate step of translation. But of course, this provides barriers in terms of making our material accessible to a wider public, and also even to scholars who are not particularly specialist in the earthly period. So our aim is to develop new technology in the form of new methods and techniques, and also develop new tools. There are challenges for machine translation. Of course, the biggest problem is data sparsity compared to modern languages. We have a much smaller corpus. There is considerably less repetition, and we have less parallel text available in the form of translation. So in order to mitigate data sparsity, there are various approaches we could employ, such as data selection. I already mentioned our selection of the earthly corpus, so a limited domain corpus with relatively repetitive content. We could also implement pre-processing, also morphological pre-analysis, including stemming lemmatization, unsupervised rule or dictionary-based procedures, and also supervised automated annotation, including the manual annotation of a gold corpus and annotation projection. I should say manual annotation was also a challenge because this is quite time-consuming, and it was quite difficult to fulfill our target in terms of manual annotation. So in terms of pre-processing, we're looking at text structure and content, normalizing sign values and word forms, and also the recognition of named entities, normalization, the verification of sign values to harmonize, to make sure we're employing the same sign values in case where signs have multiple potential values to choose from, and also the checking of sign and word lists. So these are ways in which we could attempt to mitigate the problem of data sparsity. In terms of our work packages, this is how our project was conceived from the beginning, from our application. So work packages including pre-processing and morphology, the morphological annotation, syntactic annotation, proceeding to machine translation, and then the earthly translation and evaluation. We included machine learning-based information extraction. We also aim to implement interoperability. One package focused on our methodology because we aim to make our methodology completely explicit, with the aim that colleagues would be able to replicate or to modify our working method as they see fit. And then we also focused on the applied use of data. And then finally, the infrastructure and dissemination. So this is how the project was conceived from the outset. I obviously don't have time to go into these in detail. In terms of a summary of the outcomes, so part of our outcome includes the methodology and the pipelines. I've already stressed our aim to make these completely accessible and to make all of our tools reusable by colleagues as and when they see fit. So these include data converters, plain text of various formats, and then a manual linguistic annotation helper with integrated efficient pre-annotators, and also our machine learning algorithms, including morphology annotators, statistical machine translation experiments, neural machine translation pipeline, and semantic role labeler. And then in terms of producing new information, we have our text translations, which have been kind of tested. So they achieved a blur high scale of 20.45 with neural machine translation. Also, our translations being made available on GitHub and the web interface. I've put the project website here at the bottom, so you can check that out. Text annotations, so these include manually produced annotations available on GitHub, soon on this web interface. I should also stress that part of our aim was to collaborate in producing the new CDLI interface, because this will be the platform for producing much of our work in translation, etc., and annotations, and then semantic role annotations. The documentation is fully available and released to the public domain. This is made available on the website. And then selected publications, again, there's a full list on the website. I should say that I'm not a specialist in these processes, so I try to answer the questions as best I can, but these are really better directed to my more specialist colleagues. And obviously a lot of the publications will contain the kind of details that you may be looking for. So here is a selection of the publications. And then, yeah, a snapshot of the new CDLI framework. So we collaborated in the design and layout and the design of the new CDLI interface, partly you see as the intended platform for releasing much of our data. I've kind of raced through that because I was rather afraid of being short of time. So anyway, hopefully we've perhaps got back on track. Anyway, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. You actually almost brought us back to the time schedule, so thanks a lot for hurrying up. But still,
okay, I have to confess I didn't look at the time when I started, so I have no idea how much time I actually took.
Okay. You would have, theoretically would have another 7 minutes, but so maybe we can use it for a question.
Okay, right.
One question,
right.
The signal. So you were stretching or
I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Matthew from UC Berkeley and RAL, and I'm sort of doing a project related to some of this involving Akkadian notations. So I'm wondering, actually, you said most of your texts were on the Ur3, but you also had things like royal texts, I think, and letters. And what kind of result do you have for the performance on the parsing and the performance of the parsing on those texts? Do you know?
I'm going to go back to the slide that I think you're referring to. This was basically to show you the distribution of text genres for the Ur3 period, but our focus was actually on the administrative text. If I remember correctly, at some point, I think we used some of the royal inscription data from the electronic text corpus of Sumerian royal inscriptions. But I have to tell you that I don't remember the details of how that material was actually used. It was, those data were used at some point in our process, but for the most part, we were not working with these other elements of the Ur3 corpus. So sorry, I'd have to dig into our publications to tell you where exactly in the pipeline we use the ETC SRI data. Yeah, so sorry, I'm not totally sure of that.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess there will be a lot of things to report from the MTAAC project, but we want to thank you again. Niels? Niels has another one.
Hi, Heather. This is Nick from Berkeley.
Hi.
Hi. Heather, can you give us an idea what the translations are going to look like?
To be honest, I don't have any to hand right now. And again, yeah, I'd have to refer you to Emily for the state of the art on that, because I know colleagues have been working. Yeah, I haven't been involved in what's been done since the project officially finished. So I'm not quite sure of the state of the translations at the moment. Yeah, so sorry, yeah.
Probably at the next meeting, so yes, but now thanks again.
Yeah.